As the U.S. economy continues to feast on a platter of shit kebabs, topped with anal cheese whiz, peeps who lose their jobs, and as a side effect gain their freedom from wage servitude, are often faced with homelessness due to a sudden lack of green paper required by the law to inhabit in this motherfucking system. In short, if you can't pay the motherfucking rent, the sheriff's gonna kick your ass out to the curb. Yes, there are great advantages to not having to spend your days pushing pencils, like spending your time working to support the motherfucking resistance. But you are still going to need a place to crash and gangsta chill. When faced with this dilemma, you can always squat a building. To find out more about the ancient art of occupying spaces, I spoke with a veteran squatter, Dicaprio. Hey Steve, how the fuck are you?
I'm doing good.
So, what the fuck is squatting?
Squatting is basically occupying property that you didn't purchase or you didn't inherit. It's basically occupying abandoned property. Although it could be, abandoned, it could be occupying something for political purposes, like we were just talking a moment ago about people occupying public buildings, in protest of something. But for me, what I focus on squatting is squatting abandoned properties, fixing them up, and turning them into something functional, for organizers, anti-authoritarian people, people that basically want to make the world a better place.
And have you squatted any buildings?
The place I'm living now is, well, it was a single-family home, a Victorian. It was at one point turned into a duplex, and it was abandoned about 40 years ago. I first identified the property in late 2000, early 2001, and slowly, bit by bit, worked on it with different people over time. There's like a big flux of who was working on it at any given time, and it was really destroyed. It had a tree growing into the roof, had fire damage with and needles and just trash and dead carcasses of animals, and so it was just a really big project. And over the years, we finally got it to the point where it's cleaned out, and we fixed the roof and had running water and had some plumbing and started living in there. And we still don't have electricity. Not all the plumbing is working, just enough to for basic survival. And we have a camping stove.
Why the fuck did you start squatting?
It was really me seeing squats in Europe that gave me this idea, this inspiration that people could take over abandoned properties and render them to benefit, to a positive benefit. For example, in Europe, I saw abandoned properties that had been squatted that were turned into community centers, social centers, where you'd have music, you'd have art, you'd have performances. Also libraries. I even went to a school called La Prospe in Madrid, learned Spanish. And that was an occupation of an abandoned building by the Catholic Church.
Can you give me one tip on squatting a building?
One is to really be very deliberate about what you're doing. I mean, one of the biggest things I see people that are like, I'm a squatter, or let's squat, is they just have this really impetuous idea of squatting, and I really appreciate that, and I don't want to disabuse people of that. But it's to do what I'm doing, like to create a sustainable type of occupation. It needs a lot more thought. You need to do research. You need to go out and find not just one abandoned building, but you need to find 20 abandoned buildings, and you need to document everything about them. You need to do very exhaustive research, and you need to cover your ass legally. You need to try and track down the owners, contact them, see if they're even alive, see if they're around, because if they're around and you didn't do that research, they're going to show up on your doorstep, and you're going to, and that's going to be the end of your squat.
So what the fuck is the legality of squatting a building in the U.S.?
If you read the laws on the books here in California, it basically says if you occupy land which is otherwise unoccupied, you're the owner. That's it. Again, if you occupy something, you're the owner. And it's up to anyone else to prove in a court of law that you're not. So, and that person that proves in a court of law that you're not isn't the government. It has to be someone else that claims ownership of that property. So technically, America has, or at least California, and this applies to most of America, has really strong squatters' rights. That, if you squat something, you own it. That's the way it's written. And that it was written that way for purpose, because this country was basically subdivided by a bunch of squatters. A bunch of people, from Central Europe just spread across the land and put stakes in the ground and said, this is mine. They were squatters, and they wrote the laws. And the laws they wrote was, if you squat it, it is yours.
Thanks, Steve. And that about does it for this edition of It's the End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. A bunch of peeps clicked on that PayPal button and bought me off the workforce long enough to rock this shit out. Frederick, Nigel, Andrew, Kurt, Peter, Sean, Mike, Margaret, David, Jim, Joe the drummer, Sakura, Daniel, Adam, and Rudney. Gimpacha. Also big double ups to our out-of-town interns Audrey and Alex. To comment on this show or for links on squatting info, just visit my fucking website, stimulator.tv. Now go quit your job already.
Remember, kids, you can podcast high-quality video of this show at submedia.tv.